Greetings, fellow gorehounds, and welcome back to a Blood Splattered vlog. I'm the Horror Guru, and today we're going to talk about a horror movie called Spree. Now, for those of you who don't know, Spree is not just a horror movie, it is also a black comedy and a satire of internet influencer culture. Which, if you know anything about me, you know I frickin' despise that culture, so a horror movie that satirizes that? Now that sounds like something I gotta see. And then lo and behold, I was browsing Hulu one day, and then there it was, available to watch, for free. And I like free. So I decided to give it a watch, and now I am here to tell you what I thought, so strap in.
Hold on to your butts.
Now, the first thing I noticed that I really liked about this movie that I didn't know going in was that it stars Joe Keery of Stranger Things fame. You know, the guy who played Steve. You remember Steve? I remember Steve. And I gotta say, that guy blew my mind over the course of this film because his performance was so freaking different from his performance in Stranger Things. It was a completely different character to the point where I forgot he was from Stranger Things while I was watching it. I just saw the character. With the character being this incredibly sad and pathetic and cringy dude who's fucking desperately trying to achieve internet fame, but he's like absolutely terrible at it. He's just like, he's trying way too hard and he's off-putting to everyone around him. Because the only way he thinks and he talks are in the terms of online branding. The kind of guy who, when talking to someone in person, he can't help but say shit like follow for follow. Terms that only make sense in the context of social media, yet here he is saying it to a person in front of him. And I gotta admit, I'm the kind of guy who watches a whole lot of endurance test horror movies, those horror movies that really just test your ability to sit through the most gruesome shit. And yet here I was, watching his performance and having a hard time watching it because he was just so goddamn cringy. And I mean that in a good way. He nailed the performance, but holy shit, this character was hard to fucking endure. But I'm really glad I did, because this movie ended up having not only some incredibly intense, horrific sequences, it also had some fantastic social commentary. Like, this movie says a lot about the current culture we're living in, and let me tell you, it's not pretty. And yes, even though this movie was made pre-pandemic, the commentary is still relevant in 2021. Don't think for a second just because they're not wearing masks that what they're saying in this movie is not relevant to you, because I assure you, it is. Though obviously more relevant to someone like me who makes online content because, duh. Now, the second thing I noticed about this movie that I thought was really impressive is that this is a horror movie about internet culture that actually understands internet culture and the technology and how they interface. Like, there are points in this movie when he's doing his live stream and like the Twitch style chat is going by and just some of the little comments in the chat like, ooh, this is cringe, or people weird champing. That shit felt so fucking authentic that I forgot I was watching a movie for a brief moment and felt like I was just watching any of the normal live streams I've watched. And that really says a lot, because I am hypercritical about any movie that depicts online culture, because usually movies are really bad at it. And it comes from the fact that a lot of movies, especially movies made in the last 20 years, were made by people that are like a generation removed from the culture. So you have a whole bunch of like old white dudes who don't actually understand how social media works or how the interactions usually go on it, trying to depict it and make it scary in horror films. And you end up with like really terrible fucking horror movies as a result of that. And while I'm not naming any names, you know which ones I'm talking about. In fact, I challenge you to comment below and let me know what movie you thought did the internet the worst. And I look forward to your thoughts. But not this movie. This movie gets it, and I don't know if that's because the people who made this movie are actually involved online or if they just did a lot of research, but either way, thumbs up to them for getting it right. And the third thing I noticed about this movie that I really liked is the fact that this is a movie that makes ride-sharing fucking scary, which, given all the documented cases of like violent rideshare drivers, it's about time someone made a movie about just that, and this movie fucking nails it. But I also like they didn't just leave it at guy kills people through rideshare rides. They also managed to use that aspect of the movie to also low-key talk about like school shooters. It's a small and subtle part of the movie that mainly comes in towards the end, but I thought they did a good job commenting on that too. Really, I only have like 2 negative things to say about the movie, with the first one being the obvious, that he is so good at that role and so goddamn cringy that it's really hard to watch at times. And whether that's a negative for you is going to depend entirely on what your tolerance is for cringy behavior. I'm just saying, people with secondhand embarrassment are going to have a hard time with this movie. And my second negative thought is really more of a nitpick than anything, and that's that I kind of wish the movie had just stuck to his cameras within his own little space. I was most immersed in the movie when I felt like I was watching an actual live stream, and the cutting to other people's live streams and stuff reminded me I was in a film. And that's a minor complaint because the movie's still phenomenal even with that, and I honestly don't know how you would make the same movie and take all that stuff out without removing all the meaning in the movie, so on some level, I'm glad they didn't listen to people like me, is what I'm saying. Anyway, my fellow Gorehounds, I enjoyed Spree, and I recommend you check it out for yourself. I watched it through Hulu, and again, I'm not like sponsored by Hulu or anything, I just happened to watch it through it, but it is available on video on demand on other services, just not for free. You're gonna have to pay for it there, and it's definitely worth the rental, 100%, if you're checking it out. It's even worth buying if you want to buy it, but you might want to rent it first just to make sure you can actually get through it, because, like I said, the cringe levels are fucking high. And with all that said, let us finally move on to the spoilers. So basically, this movie is about a kid named Kurt who has spent most of his life trying to get internet famous through online content like YouTube videos. Except after years and years of grinding and rebranding and trying new things, he has gotten utterly nowhere. In fact, in one of the saddest elements of the movie, a kid he used to babysit actually got way more internet famous than he did in the time since he babysitted him. And this has made him a potent combination of insanely jealous of the people who have managed to get famous in the time since he started, as well as incredibly desperate to get there himself. So yeah, right off the bat, this movie makes its themes very clear. This is a movie about trying to strive for internet fame and being willing to do anything to get there. And I do mean anything. And essentially what we discover over the course of this movie is that Kurt's last-ditch effort to get internet famous and to go viral is to essentially use his job as a rideshare driver to go on a murdering spree and live stream the whole thing. He like rigs his whole car with cameras from every possible angle so that he can capture it happening and live stream for a whole night, kill a whole bunch of people, and hopefully by the next day, be super fucking internet famous.
Super fucking internet famous.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard it in the last take, but I accidentally hit my light just off screen at the very end. But I think I'm going to keep it because that was the best take I've done so far, and I really don't feel like re-recording it, so deal with it. And so basically that's our movie. We have Kurt driving around Los Angeles, picking up people, and then choosing to either kill them or let them go, depending upon how they treat him, essentially. Though it should be noted, even the people that treat him well, when he sees the way they talk about him online afterwards, he wants to go back and kill them. So he only lets them go to some extent. And now to get a little heavy, what I really like about this element of the movie is that it kind of reflects and comments on the phenomenon of people going on like shooting sprees, but like live streaming it so that they could get more internet famous and they can get more attention. But it manages to do that without actually having it be a shooting spree, because the problem with like doing something like a movie on school shooters is that you run the risk of inspiring them. Like, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. So I kind of like that this movie managed to actually talk about that and explore a character who essentially does that, but without the shooting. It's more like a slasher killer, but with a car. Except he doesn't actually slash people until towards the end of the movie, but you get what I'm saying. But what I like about this movie's commentary on that element is how essentially what these people are looking for when they do something like this is attention above all else. Which is why we generally in the modern day tend to prefer people not to publish the names of people who do stuff like this, because it's their names in the paper they're actually striving for. That's the end goal at the end of the day, is to essentially get famous and have their name be known, because otherwise their lives are kind of fucking pathetic. You know? Kind of like this guy. And the other part of this commentary that I really like is how it also highlights how our kind of narcissistic tendencies on social media, which is fed by the social media algorithms, kind of breeds these kinds of people at the end of the day, these kind of like narcissistic personalities that are just striving for attention, everyone else be damned. Which leads into this movie's big commentary about social media and social media influencers and, you know, the people that strive to be them. Because you see, over the course of this movie, Kurt doesn't just kill random people, though he does kill random people, don't get me wrong. He also comes across various other influencers over the course of his journey and has various levels of interesting interactions with them. And it's the interactions with these characters that kind of highlight what this movie's trying to say about the state of our world right now. For example, you have the kid he used to babysit, who kind of represents the more bullying element of online culture. He's kind of like a cross between like a Logan Paul and a Leafy. And over the course of this movie, he's like egging Kurt on, like trying to encourage him to continue his streaming while also nagging him about his stream the entire time. Because really the only reason why he's getting Kurt to stream is to laugh at him. He doesn't really see Kurt as a person or as a peer, but as essentially a living cringe compilation. He's a vessel for the lulz. Hence why he encourages him, but he also negs him the entire time. Because the cruelty is the fucking point. But then you also have another influencer that gets in his car really early on in the movie and becomes important as it goes on, and that's this one woman who is a comedian and went viral because of many of her funny jokes, and she gets in the car with him and this other really douchey guy who kind of like he's basically like one of those men's rights activist types, and he's basically trying to like hit on her the entire time and she ain't having it, while Kurt is trying to connect with her, but she kind of feels sad for him and is kind of low-key making fun of him because he's so desperate and cringy and using like internet slang to her in person, and she's just like, who the fuck does that? In fact, she's the one who points out to him no one really says follow for follow in person. That's not really a thing said outside of online spaces on social media. And this character is really fucking interesting because over the course of the movie, you watch as she kind of goes on this journey of being internet famous, not really enjoying it because of the attention she gets, and then eventually this culminates to the point where she has a stand-up show, and at the stand-up show, she has this whole speech about how toxic internet culture is, and how toxic the influencer culture is, and how narcissistic it has made her and everyone around her, and basically smashes her phone on stage and just fucks off. And this creates like an emotional moment between like her and Kurt, because Kurt feels like he connects with her in that moment because he realizes he spent this whole night murdering all these people, but oh my god, what's it really for? But of course, Kurt isn't that bright, and he's very desperate, and he's a little narcissistic, so he takes the wrong messages from this. Which leads to a climax in which he tries to have a heart-to-heart with her, but she doesn't want anything to fucking do with him, and he doesn't know how to handle that because he's a fucking narcissist. He doesn't handle rejection well, so he tries to kill her anyway, and this leads into a confrontation which he ultimately loses. Yeah, he fucking loses. But then we get like the final stroke of genius of this movie. And kind of like highlights everything this movie is saying about influencer culture, social media, what it does to us, and how we treat each other on it. She takes a selfie with his dead body and then uses his attempt to kill her, the fact that she was the only survivor of the rideshare killer as he is known to become after all the events happen over the course of the movie, and becomes super famous. You know, she gets on shit like Oprah, writes a whole book about her survival, becomes social media famous again after like her brief hiatus not being on it. And even his attempt to kill her just makes her a bigger viral sensation, which she fucking like just thrives in and fucking goes all in on. And on one hand, you have a little bit of, on one hand, you have the feeling of like, man, good for her, fuck that guy. But on the other hand, you can't help but feel that this is further contributing to the problem. That this is the aftermath of this super fucking tragic and horrific of murdering spree. That the end of it is someone got famous off of it, and her getting famous off of it just makes his name more well known, to the point where a whole bunch of people online have started to identify with him the way they have some of these past like shooters that happened in the last decade. So like there's like popping up on 4chan boards and like putting compilations and writing manifestos to him, and you find out at the end of the movie that this whole movie was put together by a bunch of channers basically who worship him, and this movie was his story. Goddamn, I really enjoyed Spree. It is a hard to watch movie, mainly because of its cringiness, but it is hilarious when it is hilarious, because it's a black comedy at the end of the day. It's got a lot of social commentary. There's some fun murders in the movie. Fun murders. Yeah. And there's a lot of the movie that actually hit close to home, even as a horror tuber. Like, some of the struggles it presented for the influencers. I related a little bit. Yeah, not ashamed to admit it. Anyway, when we start having embarrassing confessions like that, it is time to wrap this shit up. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so that you're notified of my videos immediately upon their upload. And if you would like to help out my channel more directly, then be sure to check out my Patreon page. And remember, if you decide to go the Patreon route, even $1 a month can go a long way. And with all that said, my fellow Gorehounds, peace out! Which I think is something he actually said in his live stream. So, life imitates art, imitates life. Anyway, peace out, and I'll catch y'all later.